I'm here to speak to you about a very serious subject: how to make America safe.
So you have neighborhoods like that, which have been, like are right in the same pathways as like Coney Island or the Far Rockaways. They're all part of the same, and nobody talks to them. And I don't know if they have public housing, they have a large middle class. Apparently, I saw in one article that did exist, which was like a post-Sandy article, that they have, I think, the biggest percentage of city employees who live there or something like that. Wow. It was like this crazy, because it's like a very solidly middle class plus public housing neighborhood, very Caribbean. They also have a fairly high level of gun violence. And so there's a lot of interesting things, but like that's like a neighborhood where it probably wouldn't be so easy to figure out who to talk to, but like if you did find them, they'd probably be totally willing to talk to. There's neighborhoods like that, right, where that they feel harassed all the time, and so even all the stop and frisk is officially over, it's not really over in certain places and for certain populations. I mean, it's definitely diminished a lot from what it used to be, like, and there's not like the quotas and all that stuff, but there's still a lot of, and usually it's in response to a specific issue, but it's like a really, from the perspective of communities, it's like an excessive response. Yeah. So, they will go out, they'll be like, oh, there was shots fired, we're going to just go out and swing around and find every, young person. And they'll say they, like, met the description or whatever, but, like, who knows? Yeah. So, that is definitely still a considerable obstacle. Yeah.
Vast majority of Americans today do not feel safe. They fear for their children. They fear for themselves. They fear for our police officers who are being targeted with a target on their back. I know we can change it, because I did it by changing New York City from the crime capital of America to the safest large city in the United States. What I did for New York, Donald Trump will do for America.
That's the reason we need it, to deter people from carrying guns. We are the first preventers.
In a fiery speech this week, Bloomberg chastised NYPD critics.
They seem to believe that the department should be run according to the standards of political correctness, not public safety.
The mayor seemed completely unapologetic about the practice. He said it has to go forward, it's necessary. Do you have the same?
I think the mayor is absolutely correct.
Some people are just very hurt by it and upset when they're stopped unnecessarily.
Well, I understand that some people, you're taking away, at the very least, you're taking away people's time. So I understand people may not be happy with it, but I can also assure you that I go to communities of color, people want more. So
they want more stop and frisk.
Absolutely.
The era of stop and frisk has ended. Done. The era of neighborhood policing has begun. The era of stop and frisk has ended.
It was very clear that the NYPD had lost both the legal basis, but more importantly, the popular support for stop and frisk policing.
One bad cop can spoil a whole neighborhood. Yes, it can. You know? And so I still didn't get a chance to sit down with him. He's used every excuse in the book. They even kept him away for 2 or 3 months. And I was like, oh, so they rather like just hide him than to deal with it. You can't ask young people to do these things when older people can't do it. They see that. And so if I'm having a problem as a 55-year-old woman with this officer, I can imagine what the young people are going through out there with him. That pisses me off. You know, that really pisses me off. You know, I can handle it. But what are you doing to our young people? You know, that's an issue. And I don't know if you have it yet, but the young kids at Red Hook Initiative, they did their own study as to what creates violence in our community. And they said 2 things. They said either us going at each other on social media or the police. And the police got so mad at them for writing that. I literally was crossing the park to go to the Justice Center when they were like rolling out this study that they did. Did y'all see it? They did their own study. They interviewed, I think, 200 young people. And they said, this is what's happening. This is what we're feeling, and this is what could help us. And the police department was pissed off in Red Hook because they did that. Pissed.
We are one of the 15 MAP developments. Do you know about the Mayor's Action Plan for Neighborhood Safety?
Yeah,
the MAP. Red Hook is one of the MAP sites. And so we got a contract through the MAP initiative as the community mediation grantee to do peacemaking, our version of community mediation, which is peacemaking, to do that focused on the Red Hook houses here on NYCHA. So that funds a good portion of our work that's really like focused on the development and people who live within development, conflicts that come up in the development. So that's been a really helpful source of support for the work. We're working with Live in NYCHA, but it is something that we have historically not had much funding to do. So interesting, we've had the Housing Resource Center here for almost as long as we've been open. And historically, we've just not had dedicated funding for it. And I'm not totally sure why. I think sometimes housing, while it's on everybody's radar, it's like not as easy to fundraise for as you would think.
Yeah.
And also, even when we can fundraise to give ourselves more staff and capacity to do stuff, we still can't fix the deficit in NYCHA.
Of course, so, yeah.
The police don't have a lot of tools in their arsenal. And, you know, I feel for them in that they are sort of thrown out into, like, they are the first response of our whole city, even though they shouldn't be. Right? Like, they aren't really equipped to deal with mental health issues in a nuanced way. They don't want to criminalize opioid addiction and other addicts, but they don't really have any other tools. And people call them, you know, they're like, there's all these, you know, people hanging out in our playground and they're, you know, doing drugs, and they may get there and no one's doing drugs, but like there's a lot of people who shouldn't probably be in a playground, but like they don't really have a lot of tools except like move along or, you know. So it's like they're kind of the first responders without being given much else to do. And I think we're right now we're in a gap between a very fast-moving criminalizing system which we are moving away from, happily, to a very, very slow-moving public health system, which is like, over time, maybe we can reach them through some outreach. But like for communities, that doesn't necessarily always feel like it's responsive.